the radical, fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this 4th of July. Happy 4th of July, everybody. I mean, this is this the best holiday? I mean, it's like it's up there. I mean, it's this, Thanksgiving and Christmas. Those are the only ones that count. Nothing else matters. But this is the one that, I think this is the one that has the most meaning. It's the one that has the most value. It's the one that has the most intellectual, consistent intellectual grounding. I love this. 4th of July is a celebration of America. It's a celebration, most importantly, of not just America as, how did Tucker Carlson put it? Beautiful scenery, respect for God. But this is an America of the Declaration of Independence. That is what is celebrated. What is celebrated is the founding. What's celebrated is the founders. What's celebrated are the ideas that made America what it is, and that all boils down to the founding fathers, the ideas that they held, and really the ideas that they expressed in the Declaration of Independence, a document that I believe is the most important political document in all of human history. I don't think any other document comes close. I don't think the Magna Carta or the Bill of the British Bill of Rights or any of these documents, or even the Constitution, the American Constitution, come close. It is an understanding of this document that we must have if we are to resurrect this America, the America of the 4th of July. If we were to make America great again, then it is the Declaration that we must understand. It is the Declaration that we must defend. It is the Declaration that we must. It is the Declaration that we must uphold. But to uphold it, we need to understand it and have a deep understanding of it. I fear that we live in a world where the understanding of this document is lacking. Really, to understand what America is, what it represents, what the spirit is, what the sense of life is. It is the spirit, the sense of life, the ideas of the Enlightenment that in which the founders were educated, and the ideas that came together to write the Declaration and the Constitution afterwards. These are the ideas that shaped this nation. These are the ideas that made it what it is, that made it a great nation, explicitly a great nation. So, and it's what America means. It's what America means. So if you think about America, a lot of people talk about America, make America great again, or they say they love America. But what is America to them? What does it actually mean? What is the content under the term America? Is it just a place? I think for many it is. I think for people like Donald Trump and Tucker Carlson, it's just a place. It's a place where they happen to be born. It's a place that is very, very rich, and a place that has a very, very strong military force that has basically held the West together. But that's really it. And you could, I think I would argue that they have no understanding of why it's so rich and why it has such a strong military force. They have no understanding of the causes. They just accept it. It's beautiful, it's big, and it's rich, and it's strong, and it has maybe people they like, maybe not, I don't know. So if I think a majority of Americans, an overwhelming majority of Americans, America is not an idea, and to a large extent that's a fault of our educational system that has not taught them about the ideas that made America. It doesn't teach about the role of ideas in history. So the role of ideas in history, which means what matters is ideas. That's what shapes the world. And if you understand that, then you look at, okay, well, what ideas shaped America? Oh, you go back to the founders. Now, people generally have this vague notion, yeah, the founders were great men. But in what sense? In what way? What did they do? What did they say? And what is this document? You probably have readings of this document all over the country today, all over the place. People will be reading it. How many of them will be really thinking about it, contemplating it, and trying to understand it? All right, so we're going to read the Declaration of Independence today. We're going to go sentence by sentence. I will talk about it, riff on it, if you will. I'm curious about your thoughts as well about it, about what it says, why it says what it says, what are they getting at, what is the context, what is the context in which they are saying this. So we're gonna do that. We're gonna actually read hopefully the whole thing. We'll see how long it takes us. Yeah, it's long. Once you get into all the complaints about the King of England, it gets long. But it's all good stuff, and the complaints are good because maybe we can draw some parallels to the world in which we live today, and where our kings are doing something similar to us. So that's the plan. Give you a little bit of background in terms of philosophically, I think, where we are with the founding of America. What are the ideas that led to this? And then we'll dive into the document and see if we can tease these ideas out within the document. I'm not an expert on this. Not an expert on the founders. Not an expert on the founding. Not an expert on the document. I've never really done a kind of an analysis of it. So we will. I know some history. I know some philosophy of the period, and I know something about the context. And I've read quite a bit about the Enlightenment, but certainly not an expert on this. So bear with me and take that into the account. That is part of the context. And I'm eager to see what you guys have to say as well. Mary Aline, Stephen, and Tessa, all thank you for the stickers. Tessa says, happy 248th. So 2 years is going to be 250th. I mean, that is going to be... Wait a minute. Yeah, that's right. We're 24 now. So 2 years is going to be 250. Wow. We should do something special for the 250, right? There should be something special that happens at the 250th anniversary of America. It should be, maybe we can inaugurate the Ayn Rand Center, the new building for Ayn Rand in Austin, Texas. We'll have a party there, something like that, right? It's a little early for the building, but maybe. No, it's probably 2 years too early. Anyway, maybe we can just dance on the property, or lay the first foundations, or pour the first concrete, or something like that. All right. Let's see. I think we can jump in. What was I was going to... No, we're good. All right. So 1776. 1776 is if you think about the period, just in terms of general period, in terms of history of the world and where we are in terms of the world, 1776 is really the height of the Enlightenment. It is, it's the peak of the productive energies of Enlightenment thinkers all over Europe. It is the culmination of about 125 years of thinkers writing, discussing, debating, interacting in this age of reason. Thinkers debating philosophy, debating politics, debating religion, debating the nature the nature of life, the meaning of life, debating morality, but a lot of political theory. And it is about, 75 years or 70-something years after John Locke is published his main treatise. So it's definitely a few generations post-Locke. There's been a lot of integration of those ideas, a lot of chewing of those ideas. The Founding Fathers all read Locke extensively in his views about individual rights. Again, about 125 years since, really, or 150 years even since the dawning of the scientific revolution. About 80, 90 years or something like that, maybe 75, 80 years since Newton has published his laws of motion. So what is going on here? What is going on here is science, which helps, not exclusive, but helps elevate reason. Reason is man's guide. Before reason bring everything. Reason is our source for knowledge. It's our means of knowing the world. It is what integrates the content we receive from our senses. Our senses are valid. This is all in this, this is the age of reason. And a very much a rediscovery of reason. I mean, that rediscovery starts in the Renaissance, you could say, or maybe even earlier with Aquinas, but it really flowers in the Renaissance, but it really gets a boost with the scientific revolution in the 17th and late 17th century. And really, reason is now anchored in Western civilization. This is one of the core ideas of Western civilization. This is what everybody's writing about and applying it. It's a period in which everything is up for grabs, knowledge, in terms of knowledge, right? Before reason, bring everything. So before reason, they bring everything. They bring the existence of God. They bring the different commandments, the different things in these ancient texts, both the content of the Bible, but also the content of the classic literature. Remember, the classics by the early Christians and through the Middle Ages, the classics, the writings of the Greeks and the Romans are considered almost like the Bible. They're considered truth. Aristotle everything he writes is truth. You measure everything by whether Aristotle would agree with it or not, right? On the actual factual basis. You don't test it versus reality. You test it versus Aristotle. This is shattered in the 17th century. It's already being questioned before that. It's already being questioned by Galileo and others. But the 17th century sees this. No, we need to think. We need to observe reality. We need to learn from reality. Knowledge is power, Francis Bacon tells us in the early 17th century, right? Knowledge is power, and we must engage with reality. We must know. We must accumulate knowledge, and the way to know is by the use of our mind, by the use of our reason. So this is the age of reason. And again, everything is challenged. Sexual norms, and political norms, and whether you get to choose your profession or not, whether you get to choose your wife or not, all of that is questioned during this period. So this is a period of questioning and challenging. And some answers are given. Some answers are given about the nature of man as a rational being. Some answers are given about man as an end in himself, man as having rights, man as should be as a free being, should be left alone, should be left free, and then therefore thoughts about a new political system, thoughts that are going on in the heads in the writings of the French Enlightenment and the Scottish Enlightenment and the English Enlightenment about how should men organize, what kind of government, right? And the different constitutions are proposed and different models are proposed. There's no fixed answer. There's no model. There's no one thing that we can take. Oh, in the Bible it says X, or these people did that. No, everything needs to be thought of. Okay, there was a Republic in Venice. Did it work? Why didn't it work? Why did it fail? Why did the Republic in Florence fail? Why were they so short-lived? What is about them that doesn't work? How can we make it better? All this thinking is going on. All this thinking is going on, guided by reason and the elevation of the individual now. It's all about the individual. It's all about the protection of the individual. Oh, Nate says, everyone should donate $17.76. Or you could do $177.06. Or you could do $1.77 or $6. No, that doesn't work. Or you could do $1,776. I don't think YouTube allows that. But like if everybody did $17.76, that'd be good. Just variations of $17.76 sounds good. Either $17.76 or $177.60 would be fun, and we could see how far we could go by doing that. Gail, happy Independence Day. Thank you for the support. Really appreciate that. And John, thank you for the support. Prota says, why not 1,776,000? You could do that if you want to do that. Facebook, I think. PayPal. PayPal. I don't know if PayPal will take $1 million, but maybe. Don't know. Maybe Patreon. But you can certainly consider it. I'm not sure what those 3 zeros at the end. But 1,776. You can certainly do that on Patreon or on PayPal. PayPal. All right. I am going to step out for 1 second to lower the air conditioning. It's getting too hot in here. And I'll be back, and we will start a reading of the Declaration of Independence. And as you know, we'll read it in small segments of sentences, right? Because I have to comment on every word, right? Okay, I am back. Apollo Zeus just did another membership gifting. By the way, membership gifting has just taken off. It's great. I mean, I'm just looking here at some stats. Over the last few weeks, I guess we started this sometime in May with membership gifting. You guys have gifted 193 memberships. 193 memberships. We got another 2 today, so we're at 195. We now have close to 500 members, total members, which is phenomenal. 193. Now, I'm hoping that some of you who get gifted memberships, once that expires, will sign up. Well, it's $5, so I think that's the lowest amount. It's $4.99. Maybe it's $5.99, and but that's what couple of lattes or whatever. And you can keep the membership going so that we don't see big downdrifts in number of members as these memberships expire. But I know that Troy the other day, what did he gift? He gifted a lot of memberships. What was it, 50 memberships, something like that? So that's how we got to the 193. But yeah, it's a great way to support the show, to get other people to become members. The next membership show will be next Sunday. We'll do a show, topic to be determined. Happy to hear from you. Kuda Baba. YouTube says he did the first 1776, so thank you. Kuda Baba just did $17.76. Said happy Independence Day. Jennifer just did 1776. That's great. But Kuda Baba, it says this is your 5th super chat. I don't know. It strikes me that you've done more than 5, but YouTube says it's your 5th super chat. So congratulations and thank you. Thank you, guys. So yeah, 1776 is trending right now. $17.76 is trending, and we could go a long way with 1776 contributions. All right, let's get into reading the Declaration. the unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America, and it was really important to them for this to be unanimous. Every state was going to sign on. Everybody at this convention was going to sign this, and this was important to them that they approach this as a unified front, and that this document represent not just some minority within them, but all of them. Now, as we all know, and as we'll get to, the document wasn't taken as seriously as it should have been. The ideas in it weren't as taken as seriously as they should have been. The big compromise here was with the southern states and slavery, which is a huge compromise, but it was done nonetheless. So it's not clear that unanimity here meant unanimity in understanding, but it was unanimity in terms of the politics of what was going on. So here it goes. When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. Now, this, in and of itself, is a pretty amazing statement, right? This is the first paragraph of the Declaration of Independence of the United States. These are men of reason. Before they raise weapons, before they go out and use force, they are going to tell you why. They're going to lay down the reasons. They're going to explain themselves. And think about this. They're taking a historical perspective here. When in the course of human events, I mean, they're a second-rate colony in the middle of nowhere. Britain is the mightiest military force on planet Earth, the most successful nation by this point, clearly the most successful nation. They have basically outmaneuvered the French and the Spanish. They've outmaneuvered the Dutch. They are an empire. They dominate trade. You know, God, right in the middle of a sentence. Jonathan just posted, and of course, if you remember, like 3 minutes ago, I was going to do something and I forgot what I was going to do. And what I was going to do is pull out a book, but I forgot what book it was. And Jonathan just reminded me, so hold on. I was going to pull out this book, the new textbook of Americanism, which has Ayn Rand's essay. The lead essay here is, by Ayn Rand, a textbook on Americanism, which was an essay she wrote in 1946. And it is a must-read, right? She talks about what is the basic issue in the world today, collectivism versus individualism, what is the social system, and then what is the basic principle of America. This is brilliant, but I was going to get this book. I'd said something earlier that was stimulating me, and then I forgot and what book I was going to get, and luckily Jonathan is here to remind me. So thank you, Jonathan. But here it is. It's a book that you must have. It's easy to get on Amazon. It's not a particularly expensive book. It not only, it has Ayn Rand, which is, that essay is amazing, and it's not published really anywhere else. But you also got Encargate on an American political philosophy, what it is, what is the essential of it. You've also got Jonathan himself writing on property rights, Andy Bernstein writing on freedom versus dictatorship. You've got a chapter on economics by somebody whose name I won't pronounce. You've got a chapter on civil rights by Amy Peikoff, on welfare by Don, on the role of voting in the American system of government by Greg, which is interesting given our discussion the other day about voting. On the alt-right by Stuart Hayashi, I think I'm pronouncing that right. And then on the necessity and efficacy of principles by Leonard Peikoff, which is, of course, a must-read, which reminds me of the new book that just came out by Leonard, which has the essay on principles. And then you've got further commentary by Ayn Rand, excerpts from the Objectivist workshops on ethics and politics, and then a textbook on Americanism today by me, and then Americanism, Spirit of Liberty by Brad Thompson, By American is Un-American by Brad, Why Should a Distinctly American Foreign Policy, What Would It Do by Elon, and then Capitalism as Secular by Leonard Peikoff. So this is the book, the new textbook of Americanism, The Politics of Ayn Rand, edited by Jonathan Hoenig. Get a copy on Amazon, anywhere else you want, but don't forget it. All right, where were we? Yes. I mean, this document, they see what they are doing as part of a historical sequence, and they're going to explain what they're going to do. I mean, how many times in all of human history have people gone to a revolution and provided a clear explanation of why? Or how many times in human history has our political class done anything with kind of a clear explanation of why they are doing it? What is the reason? What is the cause? And here, they take this seriously. One people are going to dissolve their political bands, which have connected them with another. So they're going to dissolve the political, unity, if you will, that they've had. And they are going to establish themselves as a separate and equal station among the nations of the world. And a separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them. Right? There's a hint already at this idea of all men are created equal already in this early paragraph, right? The laws of nature and nature's God entitle them. Equal station, separate and equal station. A country among other countries. Now, you could argue about whether all countries, political entities, political bands should be viewed as equal. But I don't think so. But again, this is in a very, very different context. Right? This is an interesting phrase, right? To which the laws of nature and nature's God. Notice, this is not to which the laws of nature and of the Christian God, or the Judeo-Christian God, or any particular God. Nature's God. Now, nature's God is a term used a lot by the deists. This is a term that refers to a God that does not interfere in human affairs. It is a God that sets nature in motion and steps away. It is far from the meddling, commanding, authoritarian, jealous, easily insulted God of either the New or the Old Testament. This is a God that has set the world in motion. For all those out there who cling to the idea that this country is a Christian country, laws of nature. Nature has laws. Nature has laws. And to understand man's place in the world, one must understand the laws of nature. not a Bible, not commandments, not the sayings of God. And of that nature is God. So a concession to God, and there's another concession later to a creator, but they're purposefully using a neutral term, and indeed, in the case of nature's God, a term associated with deism, a term not associated with Christianity, not associated with the Old Testament, a term associated with a kind of understanding that nature functions by certain laws, principles, is guided by those laws, and there's a God who maybe set it all in motion. But that's about it. And, you know, part of what's deep here, and again, this is coming out of the Enlightenment, is the idea that the laws of nature are not just laws that apply out there to animals and plants. The laws of nature apply to us as human beings. We as human beings, as individuals, and in this context, when we band together to form a political entity, the laws of nature apply to us. So these laws of nature entitle us to separate and equal station. Separate and equal station. And then the final section, I noticed this is one sentence. I mean, one of the things you'll find in the Declaration is how complex the sentences are, how important it is to be able to read, how important to be able to understand commas, and how a sentence should be read. I wonder, particularly as we get further into the document, how many people today on a modern education can even read this document, can understand this document, can know what this document actually stands for. But notice how they say, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind. Now, is this second-handed, this? Who cares what mankind thinks? No. It's respect. It's respect. We are advocates of reason. Therefore, force is always a last resort. We want other advocates for reason out there to understand why we're doing this, to understand what our motivations are, to understand in reason why we have to do this, why it's necessary. Remember, in the beginning it says it becomes necessary. So a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that we should declare, that they should declare, the causes which impel them to the separation. Cause, impel, cause and effect. There are causes which impel them to the separation. It's no longer optional. Reason requires that given these causes, separation is indeed necessary. I mean, God, they respect the intelligence of the other. They respect they understand the importance of explanation. Just think of these as political figures as compared to anybody in the world in which we live today. Anybody in which we live, in the world in which we live today, in terms of political figures. All right, so now let's get into the heart of the document. So here it is, they are declaring the causes. And to do that, first, they have to lay the foundation, an intellectual foundation. There's a real recognition of hierarchy here. Here's our intellectual foundation. Here's the way we view the world. Here's what we think about the world. And then we'll show you all the concretes that make it necessary that if this is the way we think about the world, we have to become independent. We have to go against Britain. Right? Note the beautiful structure and the logic of the argument. All right, Simon, thank you for the 1776. Hookham, thank you for the sticker. Stephen Hopper, thank you for the 1776. So yeah, we're doing 1776 stickers or questions. Line up. We got about 100 people watching right now. 1776 would get us a long way towards, I mean, get way past our goal, but just half of you doing it would get us to our goal. So please consider doing 1776 in appreciation for the show and for the show more broadly and for this show in particular. So thank you to all of you who are doing this. Really, really, really appreciate it. We hold these truths to be self-evident. Yeah, it's going to be tough, right? We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's a way to start an argument, to start a presentation, right? So they're laying forward their most basic foundational truths with regard to the nature of man and with regard with regard to the nature of man and with regard to his rights, with regard to his political station, if you will. Now, you know, you could quibble with the idea that these are self-evident. Obviously, they are not. And there's a significant sense in which the founders knew this, right? I mean, if they were self-evident, why had nobody really respected these? Why is this the first political document ever to mention them? Why did it take John Locke to kind of articulate them as late as he did after 100,000 years of human history? Why did so many oppose them? So they're not self-evident in the sense that, well, of course. I think what they're getting here too is that these are, they are foundational. They are, once you accept kind of the foundational ideas of the Enlightenment, reason, and individualism, the role of the individual, the important moral role of the individual, moral purpose of the individual, to live his life. This is the starting point for politics. So you could view this as a statement of kind of, these are political actions. This is the political starting point. This is where we go from. This is where we start. And yes, can you come up with better ones for politics? This is where it starts. Then they're not making they're making a moral statement implicitly. We'll get to that. But they're not starting with metaphysics, epistemology, ethics, not their job. They're saying, given an understanding of all those, implicitly, right? Here's the only legitimate starting point for politics that we all unanimous, that we all agree on, that we all think should be, in this age of reason and enlightenment, self-evident in a sense that any other political system is going to contradict reason and the value of the individual. So we hold these truths to be self-evident. Now, again, they're not self-evident at all. Human history is filled with people. The human present is dominated overwhelmingly by people who don't know these truths, who don't understand these truths, who have no conception of these truths. That all men are created equal. What does that mean? And particularly in the world in which we live today, people think of equality as equality of outcome or equality of opportunity, which is another outcome. What do the founders mean when they say created equal? Well, this is a political document. They're equal before the political band. Within this political band, within the realm of politics, all men are equal. They're equal in, as we'll see, their rights. They all have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, the right to those. That's what they're equal in. They're created equal before the law, and the law is the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's the basis of all law. That's the basis of the political system. That's the basis of how we view this new political band, this new political arrangement. Although what they're saying here is a universal statement that applies not just to them. And this is a revolution, right? It's a revolution to talk about all men are created equal. Men have not been created equal previous to this. I mean, what society were they equal? There's almost no societies in which men were equal. They were always separate and treated differently. There always seems to be aristocrats or kings who the law did not apply to, which reminds me of that immunity case of the Supreme Court. We'll get to that probably tomorrow with more analysis. Equal. The law applies to everybody. This idea of individual rights applies to everybody. Everybody has rights. Now, if you properly understood this, that means men and women, that means blacks and whites and any other categorization you want, all human beings, all men. Men here, men did not mean just men. It meant human beings. Again, applied inconsistently. That all men are created equal and that they are endowed by their creator. Their creator, God, nature's God. Nature's God. Nature's God who set things in motion and in a sense endowed nature with certain laws. And part of that is they were endowed with unalienable rights. Now notice, these rights are not written in the New Testament, the Old Testament, in the documents of the church. These rights do not exist for Martin Luther or John Calvin or for the Baptists or for any of these sects of Christianity or Jews or Muslims. These are not rights that can be found in any of our religious documents. These rights come from a deep understanding of the nature of man, a deep understanding of the requirements of human life. What does human life require? Thinking, the ability to pursue your own values, to think and to pursue your own values. Rights. Rights is the freedom to act. The freedom to act in pursuit of your own values. That's what rights mean. So, it's part of our nature. In order for us to survive, in order for us to live. Now, they didn't have this full understanding, but it's there. It's almost there. The thinkers in the Enlightenment come close to this understanding. But for people to think for themselves and to act for themselves, to live their lives, they need to be protected from coercion and force. They need to be protected from the arbitrariness of government authority. A king, a monarch, a tribal leader. And therefore they have unalienable rights. These rights recognize their freedoms, their freedom to act. And the founders understood rights in this sense. They didn't understand rights as the entitlement to stuff. They understood rights as the freedom to act, to get the stuff. The freedom to act, to express yourself. The freedom to act, to feed yourself. The freedom to act, to pursue your values, whatever those values have to be. To pursue your career, to pursue your job, to pursue a loved one, to pursue your happiness. So you're endowed with that Creator. So unalienable rights. Unalienable means cannot be taken away. Cannot be taken away. They can be violated, but they cannot be taken away. You have them. So this is a statement against a monarch who can arbitrarily decide, no, you have these rights, but not those rights. So yesterday you had the rights, but today you don't. I'm locking you down. He can violate your rights, but you still have the right. He's in violation. He's done something wrong. And it's also a statement implicitly against democracy. Doesn't matter how many people you offend. Doesn't matter how many people disagree with you. Doesn't matter how many people think you should be silenced or you should not be allowed to pursue the particular activity that you're pursuing. It's unalienable. Again, they can violate your rights, as they do every day today in American democracy, but they can't take those rights away from you. And among these rights, right, among them, again, not a comprehensive list, particularly not given that they crossed out property, among these, a life, which philosophically is the only right you have, because everything else is a derivative of it. Everything else is just breaking down what life means. The right to life means the actions necessary to live as a human being, as a conceptual being. The right to pursue life based on your mind, based on your knowledge, based on your thinking, based on your values, all based on you, based on your life. You're the standard. And that can be broken down into property and liberty and pursuit of happiness and others, but this is purposefully general because you have a right to do all the things that your life requires, all of them, including speech and writing, which is the right to liberty. You have the right to speak and to write and to think what you want to think and express yourselves in any way you want to express. And the pursuit of happiness. You have a right to pursue happiness, which is the same as the right to life. Just now it's giving you a deeper understanding of kind of a moral statement of, well, for what should I live my life? For one's happiness. In the name of pursuing one's happiness. Wow. It's the most selfish, self-interested statement, a political statement ever. You have an unalienable right that is part of you as a human being, part of your nature. You're endowed with it, if you will. To pursue happiness, which means for them, happiness didn't mean momentary joy. It didn't mean, having fun at the party. It was much more an Aristotelian sense of, a consistent sense of well-being over time, a satisfaction, a joy in living. And they understood that it required things like knowledge and pursuit of knowledge and thinking for yourself. And, I don't know that they probably didn't have career really, but they really had this notion of individuals. I think knowledge played, and studying and learning and reading and understanding played a huge role in this. Individuals could pursue happiness, could achieve happiness. They weren't in agreement with Jordan Peterson. And this was something they had a right to do, and only they could know what pursuing happiness meant to them, because nobody else, this is one of the things about pursuit of happiness. I can't pursue your happiness for you. I can't even really, when it comes to the concretes, tell you how to pursue your happiness. Only you can decide. So it's a very, very, very deeply individualistic statement. So we hold these truths to be self-evident. If only people understood it as these are the axiomatic truths of all of politics. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's about as succinct and as deep as an important of a statement about appropriate political banding together, right? Because for one people to dissolve the political bands which connected them and to assume among the powers of those, so this is creating a new band. To create that new band, this is the principle. This is what it's about. And they go on. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just power from the consent of the governed. There's a comma there, and there's going to be a lot of commas, so let me stop there for a second. Right? Note that it's now not enough. It's not enough just to say, okay, we have these rights, but now, okay, what do we do about it? Well, these rights need to be secured. They need to be protected. They need to be preserved. They need to be secured. And for that, we need an institution. For that, we need a government. And implicitly in this, it says we're rejecting kings and monarchs and tribal leaders and witch doctors and all these other people who've established governments because their purpose was not this. Purpose of government is to secure these rights. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. Now, what's interesting is governments are instituted among men, but these other governments have failed to secure these rights. All of them. There's no example of a government. I mean, there are periods in history, short periods, where governments have secured these rights to some extent, but generally they have not. But they say this, if you understand these axiomatic concepts in terms of the basis of politics, this is why we have governments. And the fact that you guys don't have these kind of governments, you've got a problem. But this is the only reason to have a government. To secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. And these governments derive their just power from the consent of the governed, not from God, which is, what do you call it? What do you call the king's divine rights of kings? They don't get their powers from God. They don't get their powers from hereditary. They don't get their powers from being smart or being philosopher kings. They get their powers from the consent of the government. This is the beginning of the institution of a republic, which grants the governed the ability to vote government in and out. And an understanding that it's the governed's rights that this government is here to protect. It's not just two separate. This entity is there to protect the rights of that entity. So that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just power, just powers, justice, not just any powers. They could have just said deriving their powers for the consent of the government. No, just powers. Any power that's just is going to be respecting of those rights, going to be securing, working to secure those rights, and going to be a product of the consent of the governed. They go on, consent of the governed, comma. That whenever among men, what did I say? screwed up there, sorry. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and to institute new government, laying its foundations on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. So they're saying whenever a form of government becomes destructive to these ends, what are the ends? Securing these rights. Securing these rights. Whenever a government becomes destructive to these ends, I mean, this is a call for revolution all over the world, if you think about it, because every government in the world at this point in time is destructive to these ends. I think to a large extent, the founders know, I think, that they're calling for global revolution. Because that's what they're doing, whether they know it or not. It is interesting that the French supported the revolution. They did it for geopolitical reasons to undermine the British, but the French monarchy and bureaucrats don't understand that in supporting this revolution, they're supporting this document, and in supporting this document, they're supporting the end of their own regime. I think somebody like Lafayette probably understood that, but to what extent did others within the French administration, to what extent did the king, who's later in his own revolution gets killed? A revolution that might start off with some of the ambitions of the American Revolution, but soon gets derailed by the Rousseau faction, by the collectivistic faction. So whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it. That's a right to revolution. A right to revolution. And to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles, note principles, laying the foundation of this government on principles, and organizing its powers in such form. And organizing its powers in such form is, a hint to a constitution, right? We have to organize the powers, separation of powers, different bodies. I mean, they're not anywhere near ready to do that too early, but they know that that is going to be necessary. So organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Now, safety is what government is about, right? It's about protecting protecting your rights, which means protecting you from physical force, protecting you from coercion, protecting you from the crooks, the criminals, the thieves, the invaders. It's about safety. Protecting rights is about making you safe, making your environment safe so you can use your mind to pursue your values, to pursue your happiness, free of worry or concern about your physical safety. So the government is there to protect you from crooks and criminals and from fraud and anybody who violates your rights. And happiness. Now here, the founders are not implying that the government can provide you with happiness, but the government can affect your happiness. That is, it can either leave you free to pursue your happiness, or it can restrain you, which limits your ability to be happy. This is not a statement of saying government shall give you happiness. It's a recognition of the kind of government that you have, the kind of form that it takes, can affect your ability to pursue happiness. So we need to get those principles right. Right? Laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to affect happiness in the best possible way, right? To affect it, which means to make it possible, which means freedom. All right. Wow, we've gone an hour already. All right, we're not going to get through the whole document. Sorry, guys. It just ain't happening. Let's go on, see how far we get. Prudence, indeed, will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. And accordingly, all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. Now, this is interesting, right? First, they say prudence, reason, thoughtfulness, suggests that we don't want to undo a political system, for light or transient causes, for something trivial. I mean, this is a big deal what we're doing. This is a big deal, a revolution, a change, raising up against the government is a big deal. Instituting a new government is a big deal. And if it's light or transient causes, probably shouldn't do it. And on top of that, experience has shown us, unfortunately, they don't say unfortunately, but accordingly, all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer. People are willing to suffer, while evils are sufferable, than to right themselves by abolishing the form that they are accustomed, right? So if you can suffer through them, most people seem to be willing to suffer quite a bit rather than to challenge the system in which they live, right? Now, you could argue, that is unfortunate, right? And it's unfortunate maybe because most people didn't hold these truths, didn't understand them, weren't important enough to them. But this is a correct observation of the state of the world. But they are building up here to saying, what we face is not light or transient. What we face is a big deal. Now, again, if you think about this, they're rebelling against England. Probably the freest place on planet Earth at the time, politically. So, if England of 1776 is such a bad actor that it has created evils that are unsufferable, what of France? What of the Austrian-Hungarian Empire? What of the city-states of Italy? What of Spain and its Inquisition? What of the rest of the world? Again, this is a declaration of independence. This is a call for revolution on a global scale. And ultimately, it results in a revolution on a global scale because ultimately, it's these ideas, watered down, unfortunately, that make the world free, make the world relatively free, liberate the world out there. So they go on. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, I can't read. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for future security. So they're saying, look, there's been a bunch of abuses, a bunch of violations of our rights. Not just one or two, nothing light or transient. But we see a system here of repeated abuses, all with the objective, to place us under absolute despotism. Now again, Really? I mean, was what England did that bad? Yeah, but not as bad as what every other country was doing to their own citizens. Not as bad as our modern government does to us. Not as bad as our government does to us. And yet the founder says it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. In other words, for the preservation of their rights. Again, security, safety, all relate to preservation of rights, to the securing these rights. What does that say about us? I mean, we'll go through, I don't know that we have the time, but if you go through all the violations, the list of violations that they have, they sound awfully like our government today. Do we have a right to throw off such a government as we have today? Yes, we do. We do. Do we have a duty to do it? Well, it depends what you mean by duty. But I would say if we could get away with it, yeah. I don't think we can. It's part of the problem. But the abuses, the systematic abuses, with a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, we're getting there. We are definitely getting there. They continue, such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. So they're saying, we be patient. We haven't done this lightly, but now it's necessary. And notice, I love this, how they say, which constrains them, kind of, it's their duty now, they have to do it, to alter their former systems of government. So they get it. We're going to change the way we're governed. We're going to have a new system of government. It's so different than the way anybody thinks, talks about these things today. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. I mean, that's amazing. Here are the facts. Here's the evidence. Read it. This is not arbitrary. This is not us being, trigger happy. This is not us motivated by emotion. This is us analyzing the facts, understanding the proper role of government, seeing how badly it is violated, having the patience and trying to reason with the king, with his administration. All of that has failed. Now, I'm going to skip all the reasons. You can read these. You should read them. And you should think about to what extent do these apply to our governments or to governments around the world. After this, they say, in every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of a free people. Now, you could argue nobody's fit to be a ruler of a free people, but a ruler, and that's in the sense of a king. But notice how brave these guys are. Notice how unafraid they are, or maybe they're afraid, but they're heroic. They're calling the most powerful king in the world a tyrant, who is unfit to be a ruler. They're calling for a revolution on the mightiest military force in human history. To that point. A revolution they are likely to lose. They're calling into question the character of the king. A prince whose character is thus marked. He's a tyrant. It's just stunning. The courage that they had, and the certainty, the conviction that they had in what they were about to do. We gone, nor have we been wanting in attentions to our British brethren. We have warned them from time to time of attempts by their legislature to extend an unwarranted jurisdiction over us. We have reminded them of the circumstances of our immigration and settlement here. We have appealed to their native justice and magnanimity, and we have conjured them by the ties of our common kindred to disavow these usurpations, which would inevitably interrupt our connection and correspondence. They too have been deaf to the voice of justice and of consanguinity. We must therefore acquiesce in the necessity which denounces our separation and hold them, as we hold the rest of mankind, enemies in war, in peace, friends. So they're saying this is not just the king. It's not just his parliament. We have appealed to the British people. We have appealed to our family members in Britain. We have appealed to them that what is going on is unjust. We have reminded them of why we are here, of our relationship. But they too have been deaf to the voice of justice. So they too have denounced us. And therefore, this is a war against them as well. They cannot be held innocent. And this is just a tyrant, the king. I mean, it's so eloquent. It's so beautiful. And it so nails it. We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America, in General Congress, assembled, appealing to the supreme judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do in the name and by the authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states. Now notice, again, this, they're appealing to the supreme judge of the world, not God, or maybe it's people out there. But for rectitude of our intentions. For the rectitude of our intentions, right? So again, appealing to reason. Not a faith, not a randomness. Here are the reasons we've given. They're right. We presented them. We're appealing to you with what we have. Free and independent states. That they are absolved from all alliance to the British Crown, and that all political connections between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved, and that as free and independent states, they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and to do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. And so, again, we're establishing something independent. I mean, imagine the courage, the clarity that these men had. And look at our politicians today, all of them. All of them. Find me one that could stand for his beliefs in this way, could stand for principles in this way, that would able, have an interest in, standing on principle with no compromise. There's no compromise here. Well, we'd like to have a peace, and maybe the British can do something. Maybe we'll have an alliance. Maybe they can protect us. Maybe we'll, only take some states and give them the others. No, that is it. All political connections between them and the state of Great Britain are severed. Totally dissolved. Not a little bit dissolved. Not somewhat dissolved. Not even dissolved. Totally dissolved. Full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances. These are independent states now. And the final sentence, and for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. I mean, that is powerful. And it's powerful because it really meant something. They were launching a global revolution, but a revolution, again, against the mightiest force in the world. There was a good possibility, likelihood, that they would lose. They were tearing apart family ties that they had in England. Many of them had family in England. Indeed, many of them had family in the United States who disagreed with the decision, and they knew this would tear them apart. But they all knew that their lives were at stake, that if they were caught by the British, they would be hanged. They knew that if the British won, they would all be killed, their fortunes taken from them, and that they were willing to pledge that and their honor. Again, these are men of immense courage, immense conviction, deep understanding of the ideas for which they were fighting for. Again, one wonders and one, about those who, in spite of this, still advocated for slavery and how they could do that, how they could sign this document, and still advocate for slavery is just beyond my ability to comprehend. I just don't get it. And yet, obviously, these are educated men. All the delegates, educated men, knew what they were doing, and believed in a real cause here. Now, it's possible that some of them, I don't know the founders in great detail. I certainly don't know all the signers of the Declaration in great detail. It is quite possible that some of them did not fully understand what it was, what it said, what it meant. It's quite possible that they just wanted out. They wanted independence from Britain, some form of freedom, political freedom, but they had no understanding of what they were creating. But you have to believe that many of them did. Again, they were highly educated people, most of them. They were men of the Enlightenment. They had grown up with these ideas. Obviously, some of them more, Samuel Adams, John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson. These men understood what they were doing, what was happening. All right. It blows me away to read this every time I read it because of how good it is, how beautifully written it is, how true it is, and how courageous. This was not written, or at least it wasn't signed, but even written in the tranquility of some monastery or something, in the tranquility of, theoretical writings. This was written and signed in the midst of war, a war they were likely to lose. It was in the midst of a battle, of people dying, of a challenge to everything they believed in, and in the midst of of combat. There was war going on. Right? I mean, the War of Independence had started in some sense 2 years earlier in Massachusetts. But so this was not just some theoretical document that you could sit and edit and contemplate and so on. And this, of course, once you call the king the tyrant, and once you declare your independence, dissolving the bonds, there's really no going back. You've made a statement that, I mean, there's just, you can't go back up from. And that is what is going on. They're making exactly that kind of statement where this is what they can live with. All right. Let us move to the question portion. Let me see what we have here. All right, we'll get to these. I'm just looking for stickers. I think Simon was the last one. Thank you, Simon, again. John Bales, thank you. Another 1776. Yeah, those of you who came in late, you can do a sticker for 1776. That would be great to help us get to the target. Ori, thank you. Really appreciate that. Really appreciate the 1776. Glenn Nicoli, thank you for the sticker. Appreciate that. All right, so let's see who is going to go first. Oh, we've got 000 Annex, who came in yesterday with a lot of money, and then today misspelled 1776. So it's 6771. I guess you got it upside down. But since it's more money, I'm not complaining. This is good. You know, you could have done 177.6. That would have worked too. But thank you. Really, really appreciate the support. Thank you. Let's see. Richard. Haven't seen Richard in a long time. I don't know where you've been, Richard. But he hasn't been on the Super Chat, on the chat, in a long time. Used to be a regular. So Richard says, thanks for everything you do, Yaron. I'm a lawyer and would be happy to discuss Supreme Court cases if you'd like. I'm not an expert in administrative law, but one of my jobs in law school was as a research assistant focusing on Chevron and antitrust. Thank you, Richard. I really appreciate that. I'm actually going to have Steve Simpson. Steve Simpson is a lawyer at the Pacific Legal Foundation. He's also worked at the Ayn Rand Institute. I actually hired him. He used to work for the Institute for Justice. Some of you might be familiar with the Institute of Justice. Which is also an institute that, what is this doing? Institute for Justice is, like the Pacific Legal Foundation, is an institute that sues over cases where government is infringing on rights, cases where property rights, other things, and they sue the government, have been Institute for Justice and Pacific Legal Foundation very, very successful in taking many of their cases to the Supreme Court and winning and really making an actual impact on our legal system and therefore on the security of our rights. So anyway, Steve will be here. He also worked for the Ayn Rand Institute. I hired him at the Ayn Rand Institute, and he worked for a few years at the Ayn Rand Institute. He then started out at Pacific Legal Foundation, then what is this? Started at the Pacific Legal Foundation, then came to ARI, started out at the Institute for Justice, then came to ARI, and today is at the Pacific Legal Foundations. I think it's going to be a fascinating conversation. We'll be going over the different legal issues. Richard, would love to have you live on that show to kind of interact with Brian, and then sometime in the future, maybe we'll have you on the show to talk about some of these cases. I really, really, really appreciate the support and appreciate the offer to come on. Would love to have you on. And then I've got Adam Mossoff later in the year, so I'm going to have two lawyers on soon. What is going on here? Something's screwy. All right. Let's see. Linda, happy 4th of July. Thank you. Happy 4th of July to you, too. Andrew. No, Ginger first. Ginger did $50. Andrew, you only did $20. Ginger says, Happy Independence Day. I missed the reading of the Declaration at Ocon and hope we resume it next year in Boston. I'll put in a plug for that. It's definitely, I think, worth doing. Andrew, the American standard of living over time is unparalleled in history. It's a product of ideas. How is prosperity dependent on freedom? Well, if it's dependent on ideas, then those ideas have to be expressed in reality. And to be able to take your ideas as an entrepreneur, as a businessman, as an innovator in any kind of regards, or just as somebody who is hiring and firing people and so on, and designing an efficient market, a business or an efficient marketplace, to do all of those things, you have to have freedom. You have to have the freedom to engage in those activities, the freedom to hire and fire, the freedom to buy and sell, the freedom to innovate and invest. And that's where prosperity comes from. It comes from those activities that we do, that we can only do because we're free. If we have to ask permission for every one of those activities, as you do in the modern state, the amount of activity will be reduced. The speed, the passion, the intensity of those activities will be minimized or significantly reduced. And as a consequence, economic activity, economic growth will shrink. If my ideas have to get approval from others, I'm likely to have fewer ideas. Some of the ideas I have will not get approved. And I will not be able to experiment. I won't have an opportunity to fail, maybe. And that will prevent me from learning new things. So in every regard, to achieve prosperity, freedom is required. Prosperity is a consequence of production. It's a consequence of entrepreneurial activity. It's a consequence of thinking. And all of that requires freedom. All of that requires freedom. Stephen Harper, I would say Britain was the freest country in the world until the United States eliminated slavery, 1865. Yeah, I think if you include the phenomenon, the evil of slavery, I think that's probably true, particularly if you count England as only England and not as an empire, because many of its subjects overseas were not very free. But Englishmen in England were certainly free, and probably, maybe they were freer than they're certainly freer than the slaves in America. Right? America really expresses the values of the Declaration starting in 1865, following the Civil War, and even then, unfortunately, with Jim Crow laws and everything else, not fully manifested at all, ever, right? Because by the time civil rights come about in the sense of getting rid of Jim Crow laws, you've got 100 other ways in which our freedoms are being violated by the government. Andrew, how does Rand and Objectivism fill in what the founders were missing to complete the American project? Like, I think Rand has already done it. I don't think there's much more that needs to be done in terms of the theoretical basis. I mean, there's more work to be done, but the basic fundamental foundation is there. There's not a lot of work that needs to be done beyond what Ayn Rand has already provided us. She's provided us already the basis of which to take the Declaration of Independence and to completely fulfill its promise. She's done that in What is Capitalism, the essay. She's done that in Man's Rights and in The Nature of Government. Those three essays combined basically give you a blueprint for applying the Declaration consistently, fixing America to make it complete. And so those three essays, What is Capitalism, Man's Rights, and the Nature of Government. And what Objectivism needs to do is now promote that as a political project. We need to promote this, the new Americanism based on, Atlas Shrugged. I said those three essays, but it's really all in Atlas Shrugged. And Atlas Shrugged has more because those three essays are based on a certain philosophical understanding, which, again, she has given us the foundations of: a proper metaphysics, a proper epistemology, an epistemology of reason, and a morality of egoism. And that's the biggest challenge. The biggest challenge, and what the founders didn't have, and certainly the people came after didn't have, and what the people in the Enlightenment didn't completely have, is a proper, any kind of grasp of a morality of egoism. That inkling that they needed a new moral code, that the Christian altruism was not right, there was a problem with it. But they didn't know, and they didn't find an alternative. They started to talk about, maybe pain, pleasure should guide us. Maybe there's something there, maybe life. But they didn't, they couldn't bridge these arts, and then they couldn't then see yet that reason was man's basic means of survival, and the reason had to be this foundational, basically the core value, and therefore the primary virtue, rationality. They couldn't see the relation between morality and epistemology. And they couldn't see the relation between morality and nature, although they were getting close. They were getting some understanding. Again, once you start thinking about pain, pleasure as a guide, you're looking in the right place. You're looking at least in the right place. But Ayn Rand gives us that, gives us a moral code. So, So Objectivism has all the tools. I mean, there's always new work that should be done, but basically we have the tools for, to continue the revolution, to complete the revolution. We don't have an excuse that we don't know. The challenge now is to convincing other people. All right, Oi. God, this is a big assignment, Oi. He says, can you comment on the Star Spangled Banner? All right, let's read it and see what we think of this, right? Or say, can you see by the dawn's early light that so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight or the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streamed. And the rocket's red glare, the bombs burst in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave, or the land of the free and the home of the brave? So, I mean, certainly in the beginning of this, this is more kind of a battle cry. It's about, we're fighting this fight. Are we going to win? Can we survive? Can we hold together? Can we win this? And the flag is still there. It's about we're winning. And it's only the final sentence that gives you a hint of what are we fighting for. We're fighting for the land of the free and the home of the brave. That's what this is about. So all our wars, all our struggles are ultimately for a land of the free and a home of the brave. And that's a powerful statement. On the shore dimly seen through the mists of the deep, where the foe's haunting host in the dread silence reposes, what is that which the breeze or the towering steep, as it fitfully blows, half concealed, half discloses? Half conceals, half discloses. Now it catches the gleam of the morning's first beam, in full glory reflected now shines in the stream. 'Tis the star-spangled banner, O long may it wave, or the land of the free and the home of the brave. Again, it's about the flag, and it's still there. It's still there in spite of everything. It's still shining. It's still flying, not shining. It's still there. So it's very much focused on the flag as a symbol of the home of the free, of the land of the free and the home of the brave. And where is that band who so vauntingly swore that the havoc of war and the battle's confusion, a home and a country should leave us no more? Their blood has washed out their foul footsteps, pollution. No refuge could save the hurling enslaved from the terror or flight or the gloom of the grave. And the star-spangled banner in triumph doth wave, or the land of the free and the home of the brave. So this is a tribute for all the people who died and suffered to bring us this. Or thus be it ever, where freedom shall stand between their loved home and the war's dissolution. Bless this victory and peace may haveth rescued land, praise the power, and hath made and preserved us a nation. And conquered we must, when our cause it is just. And this is our motto, in God is our trust, and the star-spangled banner in triumph shall wave, or the land of the free and the home of the brave. I mean, it's not great. It doesn't really go to the core of it's not intellectual, particularly. It's more about the fighting. It's more about the battle that's involved, right? Linda says it's the Battle of Baltimore, 1814, right? So it's a battle against the British. So it's this idea that you keep having to fight for this freedom, and we can win, and blood is spilt, and for this. So it's emotional, but it's way too focused on war. It's way too focused on the fight. It's not focused enough on what the Declaration is focused on, is what makes this country different. It's land of the free, yes. Home of the brave, yes. And I think home of the brave is a good way to put it. But there's nothing here other than we're brave enough to fight for it that suggests what any of that means. So, it's emotional because it's associated with America. I like it when it's sung. I love going to baseball games where everybody sings it before the game. It's it's great, but it just doesn't tell us anything about what's unique about America beyond the home of the free, land of the free, home of the brave. Michael says, you don't need to name names in your strip club story, just general blueprint. I don't know. No, because people start speculating who they are and when this was and all of that. And it's just, one day maybe. One day. Yeah. Believe me, Michael, I am tempted. And naming names would not be bad given who's involved. So it's no friends of mine will be hurt by me naming names. But, yeah, yeah. Maybe one day. Jennifer, heroine Abigail Adams. She wrote, this is Abigail Adams, the wife of John Adams, and one of the heroes of the Revolution, and somebody who gave so much moral courage and support to John Adams and John Adams' crucial role in the Revolution. Abigail Adams writes, quote, men of sense in all ages abhor those customs that treat women only as vandals of your sex. Yeah, I mean, she should be alive today, God. Thank you, Jennifer. Andrew, the founders saw human beings as subject to and part of nature, yes. To the environmentalists, we are foreign to nature, like interlopers whose means of survival is destruction of nature. Yes, we're outside of nature, we don't belong because of our virtue, because we have reason, because we have free will. because we build cities and technology and AI and all of that, we are not part of, there's this fascination with Garden of Eden and the noble savage. And environmentalism really, really does get so much of it from Rousseau. Yeah, I should read a book on Rousseau, and because he's so important to understanding the left today. Apollo, up until what year was Britain the freest country in the world? Well, somebody said up until the emancipation of the slaves in America. Again, depending on how you define, I'd say the North was freer than Britain from the end of the Revolutionary War. It was America. The North of America was already freer. The South was not, because the South had slavery. But once the slavery is abolished, clearly America is freer than Britain. Nilufar, thank you, Yaron. Happy Independence Day. Still a benevolent country with her flaws. Yep, there's still something to fight for, definitely. Paulo Zeus, Nathaniel Brandon's contribution to the field of psychology. I don't know. I'm not a psychologist. I have no idea. I mean, self-esteem, he became big. I don't know if it's a consequence of him, if it's a consequence of Ayn Rand, if it's a consequence of somebody else that came. I don't know. I suspect it's him and Ayn Rand, but I don't know enough about psychology and the history of psychology to be able to say. Sandy, happy 4th. Thank you for all that you do. You are an inspiration to keep fighting for reason and happiness. Thank you, Sandy. Really, really appreciate it. Ike says, do you think Americans today are even component and physically fit to start a revolution today? In other words, could they physically? Some of them could. Who would they be revolting against? I mean, American military. The problem with the revolution today is not that Americans are not fit. It's that the military has weapons that we can't deal with. How do you deal with tanks and airplanes and F-16s and F-35s? I mean, you could certainly start some kind of insurgency and guerrilla warfare, but you can't take over. I mean, do you know what kind of weapons they have, the bad guys? I mean, the people in charge? So I really don't think a military revolution could be successful, not because we're too fat, but because the other side has just weapons that are, and they have surveillance ability and satellites and things like that. So to start a revolution, we would have to be able to have, to convert enough of those forces to our side early. We'd have to be able to either dismantle their satellites or have our own. So you'd have to have a large number of people. And the problem is today is that I don't think it's an issue of physical fitness. I think it's they don't have the values. They don't have the knowledge. They don't have anywhere near the inclination. They don't have the courage to sustain or to think about a revolution. So there's just nothing really to talk about. There's just no revolution possible, if you will. Put aside completely the whole issue of how fat they are, how not in good shape they are. Linda says, thank you. Happy 4th. Happy 4th, Linda. Thank you. All right, your last opportunity, guys, because we've got 4 questions and then we're done. And it looks like maybe 3 of these questions are really one. 1776 is a great number to support the show, $17.17. If somebody wants to do 177.6, that's good too. But 1776, a few of those stickers could still get us to our goal, which would be fantastic. So now's the time. Now's the time to do it. All right. And don't forget, Alex Epstein Alex Epstein is our sponsor. You go to alexepstein.substack.com and sign up to get his talking points, which are amazing, on every issue of the day related to energy, climate change, or fossil fuels. Alex has something interesting to say, and he provides it in talking points, easily digestible, easy to learn, easy to repeat, in a sense of to use in discussions, debates, arguments, so that you can have an influence on people out there. So please consider alexepstein.substack.com. More of you do that, the longer we will sustain Alex as a sponsor. Lucinda's here. Happy 4th of July, you're on. Thank you, Lucinda. Really, really appreciate that. All right, Jeremy. My fifth great-grandfather, Arthur Middleton, was one of 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence. Wow. Designed the Great Seal and wrote the South Carolina Bill of Rights and Constitution, establishing the Continental Congress. He also commanded much of the militia across the coast. My sixth was president during the Revolution. My seventh, also by name Arthur Middleton, overthrew and dissolved the Lords Proprietors in Charleston, South Carolina. If I may, let me just see. If I may, literature I would recommend, particularly today, is Washington's Farewell Address of 1796. Yes. Wow. One of the great speeches in human history. And Joseph Warren's Boston Massacre speech, which outlines our motive, including eliminating slavery. I am curious, do you know anything about your ancestors' position on slavery and how they could, for example, write the South Carolina Bill of Rights and yet still sustain slavery, hold out for slavery, maintain slavery? But that's pretty impressive. I have no idea what my fifth, sixth, seventh grandparents did, but none of it was as impressive as what you suggested. They were probably rabbis in Eastern Europe somewhere, perpetuating the religion. That's as far as my ancestors got in doing anything meaningful, I think. I suspect. I mean, who knows? I'm really curious about the slavery issue and how, obviously men of such ability and education and knowledge could accept the institution. All right, Anna Leroy. Thank you, Anna Leroy. Happy Independence Day, Yaron. Thanks for all that you do in the fight and for continued and improved liberty. I appreciate that. Thank you, Anna Leroy. Scott Wilson. Yaron, I've got a last-minute work trip to Singapore and Malaysia, and you've got a great record of Super Chat travel advice for me. Have you got any recommendations, things to do, places to eat, anything else? None for Malaysia. Sorry, I've never been to Malaysia, but Singapore, I have. Generally, so I would go, I definitely go up the skyscraper with 3 towers and a swimming pool on top. Pretty amazing place. Go at night to see the view and just see the vibe of the place. It's pretty stunning. You can even stay at that hotel. I think one of the towers is a hotel, so definitely worth seeing that. I would go to the Botanical Gardens. The Botanical Gardens are beautiful and really amazing. There is a restaurant in the Botanical Gardens. Might be, I can't remember the name of the restaurant, but there is a very, very well-regarded and well-established restaurant inside the Botanical Gardens that was really good and a nice location, and you can sit in a terrace, and it really is amazing. One second. All right, one second. 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 let me do this. Yes, in addition to that, here's some recommendations for restaurants in Singapore. 1 second, I'm getting this list out. I don't know that, don't know that, don't know that, don't know that, don't know that. Burnt ends, which is like a barbecue, Australian-style barbecue. Really amazing food if you can get in. Let's see. I can't remember the name of the restaurant in the park. Oh, God. There's a long list here. All right. I'm putting in the chat basically a source that I use for really world-class restaurants. This is for Singapore, and it lists here restaurants and bars. So usually anything they list, anything they suggest is good. Again, I think Burnt End is amazing. I'm looking for. They even have a Wolfgang Puck restaurant in Singapore, it turns out. Yeah, it's slow here. So let me see if I can see any other one that strikes me that I remember. No. There's one in particular that if I see the name, then I'll know. But yeah, I mean, if you go over this list, you'll find a ton that, Nori, N-O-U-R-I, N-O-U-R-I is, and Odette, Nori and Odette are spectacular. And highly recommend them both. Yeah. So Nuri and Odette. All right. Enough restaurant recommendations. Let's see. That's Scott. All right. Apollo Zeus, where do you see objectivism in 100 years' time? God. Everywhere? Dominant? Taught? Everywhere? Studied? Engaged in? But I don't know. 100 years, that's a long time. A long time. I mean, and too little has changed in the last 100 years. I hope more changes for the better in the next 100 years. Stephen Pettit, thoughts on Martin Luther King Jr. reciting part of the Declaration in his I Have a Dream speech? I think very powerful. I think Martin Luther King has some amazing speeches. I've seen a number of them that are just amazing. You know, the good speeches tend to be very individualistic, very pro-freedom, you know, again, very pro the individual, which is what matters. Very, very respectful, understanding of individual rights and their importance. So I think Martin Luther King knew a lot. It's surprising to me that in spite of that, he was kind of a socialist economically. But in terms of the understanding of rights and freedom and individualism, he had a lot going for him. He's one of the better people in American history. Andrew, as you've remarked, America suffers from a lack of self-esteem. But to have it, one must know what it is about the essence of America to esteem. Yes. So it's exactly what we talked about today, that you must know in order to have esteem. Western civilization has no self-esteem. Why? Because it doesn't understand its roots. It doesn't understand the ideas that made it great. It doesn't understand the concept of reason and individualism and individual rights. And it's exactly that. It's exactly this concept of individual rights that they, politically, they don't get. But to get it, they have to get reason and individualism, moral individualism. That is a morality of self-interest. And only when the West embraces those ideas, even if they embrace them softly, and they understand where they come from, historically and Ayn Rand, then they can have the full self-esteem that those ideas warrant, and then nobody can touch the West. Indeed, the rest of the world will become the West. These ideas will win globally. PB, thank you, $50. Wow, that got us right to the edge of a goal. Thank you, PB. It seems there is a tension or balance between property rights and not in my backyard, zoning. What are the principles by which to decide what is just? Is it legitimate to argue not in my backyard because it will affect my property value? Thank you. There is no tension because it's an artificial conflict. You don't have a right to a particular property value. Your right to your property doesn't mean that it's worth X and it can never be worth less than X. That would be absurd. You have a right to do with your property as you will, to use it as you want, to buy it and to sell it, to rent it out. But in terms of its value, rights say nothing about its value. So somebody builds something next door that reduces the value of our property. They're not violated your right. There's no tension. They haven't infringed on your property rights. Now, if they do something that does, I don't know, they build a nightclub next door and it blasts music to all hours of the night, that's a violation of property rights. You have you can't infringe on my space with your noise. I mean, there should be criteria for what infringement counts and what times of the day and how loud and all that. That's what the law is for, law defining property rights. You could make the same argument, I guess, about smells. You can't start a pigsty right next door to me. But if the pigsty exists there and I move into it and the smell has always been there, then I've implicitly accepted that, right? So you can't inflict smells on me that are beyond, or some reasonable standard. Can you block my view? Yeah, absolutely. Can you, I don't know, shade me so you block the sun? Absolutely. Can you, create traffic? Well, whoever owns the road, that's their business. None of yours. So you don't have a right to value, in a sense, to the price, not to value. You don't have a price. You don't have a right to your property not being value not being affected. You have a right to use and dispose of your property as you see fit. That's it. And then there could be all kinds of contractual limitations that restrict people, not zoning, but contractual limitations. This land was all developed as one unit, and there are certain restrictions of what you can build and how you can do it, covenants that affect this land because it's still private property and the road's all owned by the developer or whatever. And, you'd have to work out all the legal ramifications of that. You can't block access. You can't stop me from going home. You can't build in a way that prevents me from going to my property. But price of property should be going down generally, at least of homes. Land, I don't see why land should become more and more valuable. As we get better and better, more efficient at using that land, it might become less valuable. Andrew says, how do you view altruism as oppositional to self-esteem? Okay? I mean, I'm looking funny because it seems kind of obvious. It's in the self-esteem, right? Self-esteem, to esteem oneself. To esteem oneself requires one to think of oneself and to focus on oneself. It requires one to value oneself and to therefore pursue values that are good for oneself. Altruism tells you, no, you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't think of yourself. You shouldn't work for your own happiness. Then what am I esteeming? If other people's happiness is more important than mine, then they are more important than me. And why should I esteem myself? I should esteem other people. So altruism rejects self-esteem, undermines self-esteem, indeed makes self-esteem impossible. Self-esteem is just another way of thinking of self-interest. If I esteem myself, I pursue my own interests. That's what esteem means. It means to care. It means to value. To value is to gain or keep. To keep that esteem, I need to act on my own behalf. So it's tied up with self-interest completely. Altruism is a rejection of self-esteem. Stephen, what do you say to those who toss out the Declaration because it was written by a slave owner? How do we reconcile the contradiction? We don't have to. The Declaration stands on its own. Its language stands on its own. The ideas stand on their own. They live the contradiction. They have to reconcile the contradiction. We don't. We can say they were compartmentalized. They made a mistake. They were not perfect men. But the document is the document. It says what it says. And it is a rejection of slavery, explicitly. All men are created equal. It's a rejection of slavery. So we don't have to reconcile it. We have to treat the document for what it says and judge the men based on the fact that they wrote this document, that they fought for it. It's a huge plus. And yet still kept slaves, and that's a big negative, and it's frustrating. But it's not, you know, it doesn't diminish the greatness of the document or their actions in promoting the document. Indeed, slavery would have never been eliminated if not for this document. This is the document that lays the foundations for the eradication of slavery over the whole world. Because this is a document written for the world, if you remember what's written there. Frank says, would you know what happened with loyalists in the revolution? Some of them were jailed if they were working with the British. Some of them fled to England. Some of them fled to England and stayed in England and never came back to the United States. Some of them stayed in the United States in spite of having been loyalists and integrated into the new country and, just lived in it and adopted it and embraced it in spite of being loyalists. So it's a mixture. It's a mixture. Benjamin Franklin's son was a loyalist. He was in jail. He later returned to England and stayed in England. I don't know that he ever came back to the United States. All right. Thank you, guys. Really, really appreciate the support. Happy 4th of July. I hope you're having a great time. I hope you'll have the rest of the day a great time. Many of you probably have a long weekend, so enjoy your long weekend. I am working today, and I'll be working tomorrow, so I'll see you all tomorrow at 2 p.m. For those of you who are in Israel or who speak Hebrew, I will be doing my Hebrew show on Sunday. I'll be interviewing a member of the Israeli parliament, a member of the Israeli Knesset, about the situation in Israel and her thoughts economically and also about the war. So the whole gamut, we'll be covering the whole gamut. I see we have Lucinda just says, here's another $10, Yaron. Thank you, Lucinda. Really appreciate it. Andrew says, another thought on self-esteem. Rand once roughly equated it with respect for one's mind. Good formulation, tying psychology with health, psychological health with reason. Yeah, self-esteem, of course, where does it come from? It comes from one's respect for reason. It comes from one's living by reason, right? That's what it means to live as a human being. That's the only way one can esteem oneself, is as a rational animal, and therefore it's a respect for one's mind. She also equated it with self-interest. She was asked, in one of the interviews, she's asked, selfishness, that's a loaded word. What would you use as an alternative to selfishness? And she said self-esteem. So it's an alternative to selfishness. Lucinda just made another gift of a membership, so now we're getting very close to 200 gifted memberships. Don't forget, if you got a gifted membership, to re-up when the time comes, $4.99 I think it is, or $5.99, to re-up and stay a member. There will be a members show next Sunday, the 14th. We'll see you all tomorrow, 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Bring questions, and yeah, we'll see what happens in the news between now and then. Have a great 4th of July, and go Revolution. We are starting our own revolution, and we'll keep fighting. We'll keep fighting for one, right? That's what the Yaron Brook Show is all about, is a new revolution. Bye, everybody. See you tomorrow.